शृणुयाम देवाः। भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः। व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः। स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः। स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः। स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः। स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। आत्मानमरणिं कृत्वा प्रणवं चोत्तरारणिम्। ज्ञाननिर्मथनाभ्यासात् पाशं दहति पण्डितः। स एव माया परिमोहितात्मा शरीरमास्थाय करोति सर्वम्। स्त्रियन्नपानादिविचित्रभोगैः स एव जाग्रत् परितृप्तिमेति। स्वप्ने सजीवः सुखदुःखभोक्ता स्वमायया कल्पितविश्वलोके। सुषुप्तिकाले सकले विलीने तमोभिभूतः सुखरूपमेति। पुनश्च जन्मान्तरकर्मयोगात् स एव जीवः स्वपिति प्रबुद्धः। पुरत्रये क्रीडति यश्च जीवस्ततस्तु जातं सकलं विचित्रम्। आधारमानन्दमखण्डबोधं यस्मिन् लयं याति पुरत्रयं च। एतस्माज्जायते प्राणो मनः सर्वेन्द्रियाणि च। खं वायुर्ज्योतिरापः पृथिवी विश्वस्य धारिणी। यत्परं ब्रह्म सर्वात्मा विश्वस्यायतनं महत्। सूक्ष्मात् सूक्ष्मतरं नित्यं तत्त्वमेव त्वमेव तत्। जाग्रत् स्वप्न सुषुप्त्यादिप्रपञ्चं यत् प्रकाशते। तद्ब्रह्माहमिति ज्ञात्वा सर्वबन्धैः प्रमुच्यते। त्रिषु धामसु यद्भोग्यं भोक्ता भोगश्च यद्भवेत्। तेभ्यो विलक्षणः साक्षी चिन्मात्रोऽहं सदाशिवः। मय्येव सकलं जातं मयि सर्वं प्रतिष्ठितम्। मयि सर्वं लयं याति तद्ब्रह्माद्वयमस्म्यहम्। अणोरणीयानहमेव तद्वन्महानहं विश्वमहं विचित्रम्। पुरातनोऽहं पुरुषोऽहमीशो हिरण्मयोऽहं शिवरूपमस्मि।
Mantra 9 of Ishavasya said that there is no other means to liberation except by the knowledge of the self. Mantra 10 further clarified that the knowledge of the self is not a mere intellectual knowledge, but it is actual realization. That realization is Sarva Bhutastam Atmanam Sarva Bhutani Chatmani. That a person who is able to perceive the self in all beings and all beings in the self, that is real knowledge. So it is beyond the intellectual knowledge that the realization occurs within us, and that is by the sadhana, by dropping our ego and trying to identify with others. Slowly you are able to merge the entire beings into the Supreme Self. So that is the experience. So this is how it leads you to the knowledge of the self. Mantra 11 now is going to say how that knowledge of the self is going to be invoked from within you. In Mantra 10 we said that you are able to identify with others to the extent that you are able to identify with the Atma or the self within you. So, in various layers, when we identify with, only to that extent it is expressed outside. The world appears physical to a person who merely identifies with the physical body. The world is a bundle of emotions for a person who is identifying with the emotions within him and who is able to further go deeper inside and identify with the intellect. His perception of the world is at the intellectual plane. But deeper than that, when you go and identify with yourself, only then you are able to identify with the self of others also. As long as the identification is with the material equipments, there is a distinction and differentiation, because my body, my mind and my intellect are obviously different from every other body, mind and intellect. But when you go deeper and deeper, there is some plane of a common identification. The moment you say at an intellectual level you are fired by an ideal, let us say you identify with all Indians, that time the identification is to that extent spread to all Indians. Like that it is. When it comes to a physical personality, it is only me and myself. So each and every other person is a potential competitor, something like that. There is the level of differentiation is much higher. So we see that as we go deeper into our personalities, subtler is the identification, and the expression of that identification is more. So if a tree has to grow and the shoot has to spread further and further, you cannot directly concentrate on the shoot or the stem or the branches to grow further, but you have to water the roots. The root has to go deeper. The deeper the root goes and establishes itself, greater is the shoot outside, greater is the spread of the branches outside. That root is definitely invisible, but that is where all the nutrients go from. So the expression of the personality is from the root of your personality only. So the root of the personality is deep within you. That is where the knowledge of the self goes deeper inside. And if you are able to water the Atma inside, water the Atma means the identification is nothing but a constant thought flow. The more you are able to constantly identify with the Atma inside you, the more it expresses itself further. Now, Mantra 11 gives a very practical and a well-known method of how to invoke that Atma. It is easy to say that you have to identify with the self, but what is the process? He explains with a very brilliant example here. We'll chant Mantra 11 twice.
आत्मानमरणिं कृत्वा प्रणवं चोत्तरारणिं ज्ञाननिर्मथनाभ्यासात् पाशं दहति पण्डितः आत्मानमरणिं कृत्वा प्रणवं चोत्तरारणिं ज्ञाननिर्मथनाभ्यासात् पाशं दहति पण्डितः.
Having made the individual the lower piece of wood and Om the upper piece of wood, through churning by sustained practice of knowledge, the wise burns the bond of ignorance. A brilliant metaphor of Arani is given in this mantra. How many of you are aware of this method of invoking fire using the wood of Arani? Anybody has seen it directly? In movies. Even if you want, you can see it in YouTube. Even today, in very traditional performance of yajna, havan yajna, they do not light the initial fire by a matchstick or a matchbox. It has to be done by way of this Arani only. Arani is, there is sort of a cup type of a wood in the top. Imagine like a coconut shell. This imagination of like a coconut shell is for our easy understanding of the example, but technically the shape may be a little different and there will be a broad rod etc. in the top. But if you imagine it, it is easy for us this way. that there is a cup type of wood in the top, and that there is a rod which is also wood. That rod is cylindrical, and in the bottom similar cup type of a wood is there, a shell type of a thing is there. Now the actual Arani, there can be a very straight rod here, where there is a hole also, but more or less this is the principle. The principle is there is a wood that is holding it from the top, and there is a wood that is holding it from the bottom tight, but the rod is cylindrical where the edge is curved so that it will, when you churn, it will rotate. The rope is there by which they pull clockwise and anti-clockwise, exactly like how the butter is churned. Similar example is this. The example is also similar, the process is also similar, that there is a churning. In this churning, it is a dedicated churning, it is a very fast and strong churning. When it is done over a period of time, maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes, something like that. And as I said, traditionally they chant mantras and other thing that they do, but the point here is it's a very dedicated and a strong, fast churning. When you do that, by the friction and the heat, fire is generated. And for the convenience purpose, to catch the fire, they may keep a small thread or something so that it immediately catches fire. And then with that fire, they put it in that kund where it is set ablaze. Then they fan it so that the fire becomes bigger. Now, the interesting aspect of the example is the fire becomes manifest upon churning. Where was the fire before that? Inherent in the wood. Inherent in the wood. Now, forget that thread and other things out of the example. Suppose you assume you keep on churning and the fire comes, and you keep on churning further till the fire itself catches in a big way. We do not know how long and how strong you have to churn, but let us assume you do that. When that fire comes as it is, what is it going to actually burn? The wood only. So it is a very interesting combination that the fire is also inherent in the wood, hidden, and it is invoked and brought to the surface by churning. When it is brought to the surface, what does it burn? The indhanam or the fuel is also the wood. So it seems to be like a impossible combination of fire and fuel in the same package. How can fire and fuel be in the same package? Immediately the fuel should have gone and then the fire would have exhausted. But the fact is the wood is there. The wood is there, it is containing the fire inside. The fire doesn't manifest easily. For the manifestation of the fire, there is a special process. When you do that process very diligently, in a very strong way, then there is a method by which that unmanifest fire comes out as a manifest fire. This manifest fire can consume the wood finally. Just to extend that example further, finally when the wood is completely burnt, then there is no fire, no fuel. But as long as the wood is there, fire is there. Okay? And then it will completely consume the wood. So what will finally consume the wood is the fire only. And this fire is not brought from anywhere outside. The fire is there from inside only. Exactly the same way in the butter example, it is the same, that there is a churning by which the milk is separated and the butter is separated. That's a similar example, but the process is the same. Here, this lower cup, the wood at the lower end of the Arani, this equipment is the ego or the individuality, which is our normal self. Atmanam aranim kritva pranavam cha uttararanim. That upper cup, what you have to now bring it into that individual is pranava or the Om. Om represents the highest form of Brahman. It is the highest symbolism of Brahman. Brahman which cannot be directly conceived needs some representation, some symbolism, some idol, something for you to conceive of. And the highest form of representation is Om, which we saw in the previous mantras. What is the significance as to the usage of Om? In some Upanishads, various upasanas are given. Upasana means, as we said, it's a worship. In that, Pranava Upasana is given. Pranava Upasana is to worship the Brahman in the form of Om only. So, here is a human as an individual who has a lower nature and a higher nature. The normal individual that we are, as represented by us, who has evolved from lower organisms, maybe whatever we call as our Prakriti or our nature represents our lower nature. But a human being alone has the capacity to move from the lower nature to the higher nature. In other words, vis-a-vis, if you compare the other organisms or creatures, they also merely exhibit their nature, but that's all it is. It is a mechanical exhibition of their nature, expression of their nature. There is no such thing as lower or higher for them. There is no such thing as conscious evolution or devolution for them. They have to go through their process of life and die. So they also consciously gain no punya, papa, nothing like that it is. It is a computerized, mechanized way of life which is available for all other creatures. But it is a blessing for the human being that though he is also having base tendencies and other vasanas at the lower level, he has got the capacity, he has got the intellect, and he has got the self-effort to inquire as to what is this life all about, what is beyond this life. And then when he comes in contact with a guru or this knowledge, he is able to understand that his higher nature is something else. And that higher nature is the supreme self or the Atma. And that I have to reach that Atma is the goal of life. Once he understands this, the process is that he is able to direct his thought towards that, for which he is given an ideal or a goal. And Pranava representing that is the higher nature or the higher goal. So if the individual is now caught between this higher and lower natures, in this process when he churns, he is able to slowly move from the lower nature to the higher nature. In this, what is deep hidden within you, which is the knowledge of the self, gets invoked. In other words, the knowledge of the self or the self as it is, the pure divine nature within you, is lying hidden within you. It is latent. This fire cannot be brought in from outside and put into you. The works of a guru, the grace of guru, the grace of this knowledge, everything only can try and fan it. But the effort is from within you to first invoke it. For invoking this knowledge is helpful, but you can never bring the fire if the fire is not already within you. So it is a proof that it is there already within us. By churning, this knowledge slowly comes out. And how it is represented is, that is the refinement of our mind and intellect. That's about all. When you say a person is, we are all somewhere in between 0 and 100, and you say that a person has opened up to the extent of 15% or 20%. These are all arbitrary examples that we give. What it means is that the mind and intellect is refined to such an extent that the attunement to the self is to that extent. So in this Janma, if you are able to move that percentage from 20 to 21 to 25, whatever, that you are able to move, or even if you have a good self-effort and you go up to 100 also, that is the purpose of life. And exactly like this in the example, once the wood has burned to some extent, that wood is never going to come back. Exactly like that, once the area of ignorance is conquered by the knowledge of the self, there is no coming back there. You only go further and further. Then the fire becomes bigger and bigger, isn't it? When the burning happens, when you add as though the fuel is there fully consumed, the fire becomes bigger and bigger, brighter and brighter. So this example is a very complete example, a very beautiful example. So by this combination, so the wood represents the matter, that is we, the matter made up of body, mind and intellect. Deep within this body, mind and intellect is hidden the Atma or the self. by the process of churning. So now what is the process of churning? This knowledge of the self that has been taught to us in the Upanishads, in Gita, by the Guru, is ultimately saying that you are not this body. When I say you are not the body, it means you are not the body, mind and intellect, you are the self. Mind and intellect is contained within the body. So I am not the body, I am the self. This is the churning that is going on. Any identification is nothing but a continuous thought process. As you think, so you become, is the law of nature. We have been considering ourselves to be this body for many janmas. He is going to say a couple of mantras later. Punascha janmantara karma yoga. That karma of many janmas, like that it is. So the identification of that individuality with the body has been going on for many janmas, and therefore we consider ourselves to be this. Now with this knowledge, you have to negate the material equipments and assert the self. So I am not this body, mind and intellect, I am the self. This is the churning that is going on. It is not a mechanical repetition. It is what is known as a remembrance and a reflection and a contemplation about it. So all the morning study that we do, that we are trying to understand the subtle thoughts that are given in this book, or you can take Fall of Human Intellect or Vedanta treatise to begin with, it is to think in terms of separation of the matter and spirit only ultimately. It is not to merely gain a scholastic education by which we can answer various questions, or we will become more knowledgeable in the terms of worldly knowledge. No, it is not so. This churning is to be done with that spirit of separating the spirit and matter. Once you do that, like in the butter example, it is very clear, the butter separates slowly, and that butter is stored in cool water. And when enough butter is collected like this on a daily basis, then you heat it. That is ghee. Ghee is clarified butter, which is permanent. So that example even further goes to say that from your mind, the self as it were separates, which is stored in the cool water of devotion. That self doesn't sink in the samsara. That's what it means. And then when completely the churning takes place and the separation happens, you go through the white heat of meditation, and what comes out is a permanent state of self-realization. Ghee is permanent. It doesn't get spoiled at all. So like that is the permanent state of realization. This churning has to be constantly done. So all the sadhana that we do is finally to bring into this point of negation and assertion. If a person is able to do this directly, this is called as even Nirguna Upasana. That's why the ideal of Om is given here. Om is as such having no attributes or something. That's why it is as close to the self as possible. And that fire which is coming out is called as Jnanagni. Jnanagni says Bhagavad Gita also. All the bonds of ignorance are burnt instantly by the fire of knowledge. So the Panditaha here, the wise people, invoke this fire from within them like Arani. They keep themselves between the higher and lower nature by churning, by which they will go to the higher nature. In this process of churning, they bring out the fire which finally burn themselves, means burn their ego, burn their individuality, burn their ignorance. A impossible combination of spirit and matter seems to be there within us. That also this example brings out. An impossible combination of fire and fuel are there within this wood. Having made the individual the lower piece of wood and Om the upper piece of wood, through churning by sustained practice of knowledge, the wise burns the bond of ignorance. Sustained practice of knowledge, that is very important. And when you see that YouTube video, 2-3 minutes, you have to see that you cannot casually do it. When you do it casually, the friction doesn't happen with such force. So when you do that, there has to be a very dedicated effort. So similarly, it is not just to get just a mental satisfaction. Somehow I got up early in the morning and did some study. At least like any other mechanical ritual, we can do this also as a mechanical ritual. Instead of doing anything, this is somewhat better. That's about all we can say, nothing else. But you have to then sustainedly do it with a greater impact and greater passion. Energy, when it is directed with such force, only brings out the results. See, it is not that, you think about this, when a person is churning this rod with the rope, suppose if it is going to catch fire, let us say in 2 minutes with intense churning, when you do it little more relaxed and casual, it is not proportionately that it will come in 10 minutes or even half an hour. Maybe it will take ages. In other words, it is like something like it is not arithmetic in its calculation, it's geometric that way. So the intensity has to be much more intense. So that is why in reflection, what effect the depth of that reflection will give will not be gained by the length. See, suppose you say, I have been reflecting on various textbooks. I study Gita, I study Upanishad, I study Ramayana, Mahabharata, and something or the other I keep on studying daily. That should automatically bring about this separation of spirit and matter. It doesn't happen. What really brings about the change, what really brings about that separation is the depth. So you take up Bhagavad Gita, or you take up Vedanta treatise, but you go deeper into it and find that is when your knowledge opens up to the unknown areas of ignorance. So what is required is the intensity of the churning. Intensity is very important. And even in any worldly activities also, we find that when there is a concerted effort, only then there is a result. Otherwise you leave the wood. Will it burn or not as it is? You don't do any churning. It won't?
Like 100 years.
100 years?
Someone else.
There are some, have you seen in some houses there are 100-year-old furniture?
You will leave it in the sun, open in the sun, it will take.
Other factors, not by itself.
By itself, it will take, I don't know the calculation, 30,000, 40,000, something like that, years. It will. So if you want to leave it, you take that also aspect into this example. You don't do anything. Maybe Janma after Janma we will go. We do not know when. But over many years, many Janmas, when and how we will meet a Guru. So it will casually, like a good strain, it will go. But when you put it in fire, it has to burn instantly. In other words, there also the process is the same. Sun and other modes of heat is going to do what is going to do that to that fire, but to that wood. But it is not going to be instantaneous. Only when we understand the necessity to burn the wood, do we put in that intense effort. So once we understand that I need to burn up my vasanas, I need to burn up my ignorance, will our effort be intense? So this is a complete example by which the other aspect we understand is the churning has to be constant and intense. It has to be intense. Yeah.
Can we relate it with that phrase Sravanam, Maranam and Jasanam?
We can relate. There the reflection process is the churning. Reflection and contemplation is the churning aspect of it. Shravanam. So based on what you hear, what you read, then you reflect this. And this mantra is parallel is there. You can refer to Atma Bodha verse 42. Same. There Adi Shankaracharya uses Arani example there. Atma Bodha is in 68 verses. You have more than 50 examples, something like that. Almost every verse has an example. And he is explaining the knowledge of the self through various angles, giving example for each. And you will find many Vedantic examples are covered there. This Arani example is also coming there. Maybe the source is Kaivalya only. In Swamiji's commentary, he mentions Kaivalya there. Yes.
So you said that then we realize that through this constant churning that you're not body, mind, intellect.
Yes.
And spirit is separate from that. So where I'm confused is that you need to develop your intellect, develop viveka and get the art of discrimination, what is right and what is wrong. And finally again you are dissociating with the intellect itself. So how does one, that happens really at a very high level? When you reach a certain level, then you are supposed to drop your intellect also.
Yeah. In other words, Atma Bodha, again another example gives a close parallel to what you are asking. it is talking about when you say the thought of the self is able to wipe away all other thoughts. That means the question is asked as to my mind already has millions of thoughts, and you are now asking me to add one more thought to it, which is the thought of the self. So how is this one more thought going to help clear away all other thoughts? In that he gives the example of kataka nut powder, which is used for cleaning water, which is equivalent of alum in the modern days of cleaning a water tank or something like that, or a well. What you do is you throw that piece of alum inside the container, or the kataka nut powder is thrown in the pot of water. It forms a thin film on the surface of the water. Once this thin film is formed, the suspended impurities in the water get stuck to it. Once it gets stuck to it, the film becomes heavier, by which it sinks down slowly. As it sinks down, other suspended particles and impurities get stuck to it. It becomes heavier and it goes down. In this process, the entire suspended impurities of the water get stuck to the film, and finally it settles down at the bottom. What you have in the top is a clear water. Now in this example, the water already has impurities. Okay, in that you are throwing kataka nut powder, which is one more impurity as far as the pure water is concerned. But this is different from all other impurities because this is able to attract all other impurities and wipe it off. But interesting aspect is finally this also goes down. What is thrown as the kataka nut powder also goes down. Exactly like that, the intellect is given this thought of the self to contemplate upon. Intellect in this context has to be understood as that which is discriminating between the terrestrial and transcendental, that which is real and unreal. That is what is saying. In other words, you cannot assert what is real because the intellect cannot capture what is Brahman. But you can keep on negating what is not Brahman. So all the things which are, today we chanted this Mano Buddhi Ahankaraj, Atma Shatakam, one of the fabulous shloka composed by Adi Shankaracharya, where he says, Mano Buddhi Ahankara Chittani Naham, Nacha Shrotra Jivve, Nacha Grana Netre. Throughout that mantra, he is negating everything that you can conceive of as matter. He is saying, I am not this mind, I am not the buddhi, I am not the intellect, I am not the chit, I am not the ahankar, which is all subtle equipments. Then I am not the five senses, nacha grana netre, and not the five elements, chidananda rupaha shivoham shivoham. That keeps on coming at the end of every stanza. I am only that chidananda rupa. I am Shiva. Shiva is same thing that is used in this Upanishad. Shivoham, shivoham, shivam, shivam. I am that auspicious self. So then he goes on to say, I have no friends, I have no relatives, I have no guru, I have no shishya, everything. So in the sixth stanza, almost he negates everything that you can conceive of. But at the end of every stanza, he asserts that I am the self. So this assertion and negation, as I said, that self cannot be conceived, but you go and hit that boundary where you are feeling that. And the other side is you are negating all that is not Brahman. By this churning, by this process, you are trying to bring that thought of the self alone within you, and finally the thought of the self also gets dissolved by itself. In that final meditation, when you bring it to the last thought, that also gets dissolved. So the peculiarity of this thought is that it will help you to remove all other thoughts, and in the process finally it gets dissolved by itself. So that last thought, how it gets dissolved, let us not worry about it now, not from the point of view of where you are or what your sadhana is, but that last thought getting rid of is not in anybody's effort. Somebody says, Mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. He is going to remove that last thought as it is. So in the process, the last equipment that goes away from us, the intellect also goes away from us. Till that point of time, the intellect helps us to discriminate between the real and unreal and move towards the reality.
Sir,
Yes.
this question of this thing, what you're saying is the last thought is taken away by His grace. The same example you had given once in the Janmashtami, where you said that you take the butter,
Yes.
then you put it up in the handi, then God will come and steal it.
Yeah.
That is now in the human context, once you are churning, then leaving it there means what? Because just
leaving it there is to keep the thought aloft on the higher self. So contemplating and thinking about the self all the time. That's all we can do, which culminates finally in meditation. That is the last thought. That is the last subtlest karma that we can do. When I say karma, that is the sadhana that we can do, practice we can do. So we have to just leave it at that and relax. Finally, what happens after that is not in our hands.
doing meditation is not an effort.
Yeah, in meditation, what you do, you can only sustain that thought. That's about all. Try to plunge into that silence. What happens to that thought is not in your hands. Like, would you say getting to sleep is your effort or what? What is it?
This meaning.
When you leave the thought of the sleep, only then the sleep over. He is going to say, Tamo vibhuta sukha rupameti. By overpowering of that ignorance, you get that state of sukha, which is this tamasic ignorance of the deep sleep. So like that, in that state, you can bring it to that last thought and try to sustain it in that moment of silence by elongating the chant. That's about all we can do. And then finally, when it stops and when realization occurs, that is not in our hands. In other words, that's a transition from finitude to infinitude. It is so infinitude cannot come out of finite efforts. That is not in the purview of cause and effect of the effort. Mantra 12 and 13 chanted together.
Sa eva maya parimohitatma shariramastaya karoti sarvam striyannapanadi vichitra bhogais sa eva jagrat paritriptimeti swapne sajivas sukha dukkha bhokta swamayaya kalpita vishvaloke सुषुप्तिकाले सकले विलीने तमोभिभूतः सुखरूपमेति स एव माया परिमोहितात्मा शरीरमास्थाय करोति सर्वम् स्त्रियन्नपानादिविचित्रभोगैः स एव जाग्रत् परितृप्तिमेति स्वप्ने सजीवः सुखदुःखभोक्ता स्वमायया कल्पितविश्वलोके सुषुप्तिकाले सकले विलीने तमोभिभूतः सुखरूपमेति.
He alone, the self abiding in the body, completely deluded by illusion, does everything. He alone, in the waking state, derives great satisfaction through varied enjoyment of woman, food, drink, etc. In the dream state, that individual self experiences joy and sorrow in the whole world projected by his own illusion. In the period of deep sleep, when everything dissolves, overcome by tamas, ignorance, he attains the state of bliss. Here is a very direct mantra which talks about waking, dream and deep sleep. You don't find this directly being talked about in Bhagavad Gita, though there may be some indirect indications and we can derive the knowledge. These are original thoughts of the Upanishads. Mandukya Upanishad, which is the shortest in terms of number of mantras, I think only 12 mantras, very powerful. Like atom is very small, but how powerful it is, like that it is. There is another Upanishad called Muktika Upanishad, which is talking about the glory of Mandukya Upanishad. It says Mandukya is that's enough, And in Swami Chinmayananda's course of study in the order in which we have to study, he talks about his initial books like Kindle Life and Self Unfoldment, like that, and then various other Prakarana Granthas and Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads. In that, finally, he says, is the last book is the Mandukya Upanishad. Adi Shankaracharya's Paramaguru Gaudapada writes a Karika on Mandukya Upanishad, which is 100 verses or so, without which to study Mandukya Upanishad is not possible. Karika is not exactly a commentary, but it is like a treatise which takes the essence of it and further explains it. And Mandukya Upanishad talks about this directly. It is talking about the three states of consciousness and that which is beyond it, and how it is all in a state of Maya is directly given in Mandukya Upanishad. In this Upanishad, these two mantras give a direct reference to that. From here, the topic 3 starts, mantras 12 to 16. These 5 mantras realize that thou art. This is the message that is given here. We can refer to the portion of waking, dream and deep sleep that we did during the portion or the idea that was discussed under Tattva Bodha also. There it is all given in detail. The basic principle is this, that it is the Supreme Self, Parimohitatma, which is deluded by illusion. Parimohitatma, it is deluded. Shariram astaya karoti sarvam. Then it abides in the body, it acquires a body, Shariram asthaya karoti sarvam. Then it does everything. This is how the Supreme Self has gained the individuality and it does all the activities. Everything that you do is based on this only. And then the next 3 lines go on to describe what are the areas in which this individual functions. One is the area of waking world, one is the area of dream world, another is the area of deep sleep world. You take into account all your experiences in this lifetime, you are going to go through any one of these states only. All through our lifetime, we give utmost importance to this personality of ours, which you know by your name, and maybe by a visiting card you are identifying your profession, and that is what you believe yourself to be. That is what everybody believes himself to be. And he goes on carrying on in this life, in this world, which is a very solid seeming world. And when you come across with reference to your experiences of pain, sorrow and other agitations, and you want to find out the solution as to how to get out of this, all the data that we work with is within the realm of this world that we experience. And if anybody asks about you, you are going to think about what is you when you are in this state of waking consciousness. So this aspect of it, Swami Ramatirtha takes up and highlights that however intelligent they are, the Western philosophers who are like original thinkers, or the great thinkers, but they will not be able to come up with the overall or total solution because the data that they take to solve the problem is not complete. The data is that they have taken is that this waking world and you as a waker who is going through this waking world. But in reality, nearly 1/3 of our life is beyond this waking world. If you include the early part of childhood, which is not a fully grown adult, little more you can add, 35 to 40% of our lives we are spending while living in this world somewhere else. Meaning, when we go to sleep, we are not in this world as far as our experience is concerned. I am not saying that world is going somewhere else, or it is going into disappear. Nothing like that. It is world may be there, But you as an experiencer, this world is not available for you, you are not available for the world, and this happens nearly more than 1/3 of our lifetime, and we have not cared to examine what is it that is happening at that point of time, which is also very much part of our experience only, which is very much part of our life only. So you are not merely this waking personality that you believe yourself to be. There are also other personalities that you assume within this lifetime. Let us take the realm of our known life, which is from birth to death in this body, in this lifetime. Because if we further extend, then we do not know what is happening beyond our death, although that is not the scope of the discussion here. Even within the known realm of our birth and death, within this Janma, we are ignoring. Sort of ignoring means not giving importance, not examining the other two states of consciousness that we normally go through. And unnaturally, there may be other thing also which we need not take into consideration. That is why very few mantras later he is going to say Jagrat, Swapna, Sushuptyadi. We said there are three states of consciousness: Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti. Jagrat is waking, Swapna is dreaming, Sushupti is deep sleep. Adi means equivalent to etc. What is etc.?
Some more coming.
What is that?
Oh,
Sleepwalking.
Okay. Somebody says, yeah, I am walking while sleeping. Do I belong to this waking world, or I belong to the sleeping world? Or coma state. Something like that. Unconscious state for something, or somebody in a trance state. All those things, all the experience put together can be fitted into these three broad categories. That's about all. So he says very clearly there, Jagrat, Swapna, Sushuptyadi. That means you don't try to debate and argue and bring in all other states also, even if you bring everything else. That mantra we'll see later what he's saying. But the entire experience of us is caught within this triangle of waking, dream and deep sleep. So these two mantras are just giving a basic understanding, a basic explanation as to what is really happening in these three states. So the fundamentals have to be clear, that the supreme consciousness is the self. The supreme consciousness, when it is in association with Maya, we'll see what Maya is, because this word is used in this mantra. It is completely deluded by ignorance. Deluded by ignorance means the supreme self that we are deluded that we do not know that we are the self. That is the ultimate delusion. That ultimate delusion is that I am not aware of the fact that I am the self. This is the knowledge that Upanishad is trying to drill into our heads, that you are the self. You are ultimately the self is the actual fact. And this is corroborated by great masters' experience. This is corroborated in certain way by our own experiences that we can project and understand. But however much you try, you are not able to grasp it. So we are all caught up in that experience. And even that our trying is only from time to time. Again and again we are brought into some other way of life, way of experience, that we are completely deluded, that we do not know or do not even care to think about what we are. Very confident. That is why in the end of the first mantra, very beautiful word he says, Paritripti Meti. Paritripti Meti means he is very satisfied. How are you, sir? I am very fine. Thank you. Everything is fine. So this is where Swamiji attacks. Nothing is fine about you, and you are grandly proclaiming that everything is fine. It's complacency. It's absolute complacency, which is the opposite of what Upanishad wants us to maintain, which is Mumukshatva. Mumukshatva is that fire that must burn within us, by which we want to realize the self, and this fire must never be let, what do you call, sim. Yeah, you do not allow it to go down, or it will never get put off. But if you put more and more dirt, more and more leaves and more dust on it, it will go into a sort of unmanifest state. Then to fan it becomes again difficult. Once you have found that fire, It is your duty to keep it burning, and it should turn into a conflagration. Like Swami Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says, how much a man will want to feel like coming out of water when you immerse his head under water forcefully, not allowing him to get up. You completely immerse that person under water, how much pressure he will feel to want to come out to the surface and breathe. That much and more pressure we must have to get to that final state of consciousness. That must be the mumukshatva. That is mumukshatva. That pressure, that intense desire, that intense want. This is what he says as opposite of complacency. That is, everything is fine. Everything is fine is genuinely everything is fine in terms of what you can think of your finances or relationship or anything. Or if you feel something is lacking, that is, once that is done, everything is fine. Daughter's marriage is over, then everything is fine. Or this land project is there, then everything is fine. So our fine, what we say is fine, is with reference to what we go through as our experiences in the waking world, and we feel satisfied. And so I am feeling happy. What else do I need? It's all Guru's grace. It's all God's grace. All these words, everything we will say. But we really don't understand actually what we are missing. In the Kena Upanishad, this is what he says, that Ihached avedi data satyam asti nacheti havedin mahati vinashti. If a person has not realized his self in this lifetime here, it is a supremely great loss. That loss we are just not realizing. So he says paritripti meti. In Jagrat state we are in a very satisfied state. And same thing in the Swapna state and in the Sukha Rupa meti. So in these three states of consciousness, we are actually not what we really are. Forgetting that state, we go through various experiences and somewhat feel satisfied. When he uses the word tripti meti, means a person can be agitated also. That doesn't turn him towards the self or anything. If my problem with my debtors is over, I'll be happy and he'll come and settle again in what is this samsaric world only. It is not going to take him to the next level of consciousness. So this aspect is called as delusion. Delusion is where we are not really understanding what our state is. A sort of ignorance of ignorance. We are ignorant of the self and we are ignorant that we are ignorant. That can never be set right by anything external to us. No guru, no God, nobody outside external to us can do anything. They can all help. Only if we are having that awareness from inside. That we lack, that awareness is what I mentioned by ignorance of ignorance. See, if you are ignorant and you are aware of your ignorance, you will do everything to gain knowledge. You will go to the right source of knowledge, you will go to the guru, or you will find out something, because that lurking thing is there within you. See, a person has some disease like cancer or something, and he is ignorant of that disease within him. He is quite comfortable and happy till a point will come where it will manifest in a bad way and then you have to do operation or something like that. But if a person has cancer and he is aware that he is having cancer, even then he is going to suffer, but at least he will now try to find out some solution. The moment he understands the intensity of what that disease is. We have not understood that intensity of what that ignorance is. That is where the Guru should come into our life and help us. There is no other way. We can do Google, we can learn all the Upanishads directly from the net also. It is not going to make any difference to us. When I say Guru, what it means is, in association with such persons who are having a high state of consciousness, only then it will get kindled. So therefore satsang is very important. It's very, very important. If you get into the internet, you will find that very many stalwarts, intelligent people who may or may not have studied Vedanta, Bhagavad Gita formally under a guru, but they may be experts and they have read many books on their own and very sharp arguments they will give, etc., which is good. Which is good that some sort of awareness about our scriptures are all there. But that need not necessarily convert into a spiritual unfoldment. Just as a person can be expert in economics, in politics, in various other things. A person can be expert in a religious field also. So, by debating and arguing, just as a person debates political and economic subject with some other person, there you may get into argument. Somebody may be in favor of Narendra Modi, somebody may be against him, and then you finally end up getting into a heated argument. It really doesn't get anywhere, even in knowing the facts of the case also. Parallelly, exactly the same thing that can happen in spiritual thing. We may get into the argument and debate of Vishishta Advaita and Dvaita and various other. There are enough scope here. That is why in the Sahana Vavatu mantra, in the Shanti mantra, he says, Ma Vidvishavahe, may we not become disputatious. Because that Shanti must be kept in the beginning of the class and at the end of the class. But through the class also, as you are getting into the subtle knowledge, your reflection and thinking, which may vary from other persons, and being a subtle knowledge, each and every person is going to view from his level of understanding. There will be debates, there will be arguments, may we not become disputatious. See, a positive debate and a positive argument, group discussion is a very essential aspect in spiritual development. Let that be clear. That is also a means of reflection. Gita says, Bodhayanta parasparam katayantasya mam nityam. People talk about, one person talks, another person listens. This is like a lecture. Bodhayanta parasparam. This is like a discussion. All these are means of learning. Vade vade tattva bodhaha. By genuine argument and counter argument, do you get into the truth. The entire emphasis is not on the not on who wins the argument or who loses the argument. In finding out the truth. This is what happened when Adi Shankaracharya got into an argument, debate with Mandana Mishra. Totally opposite schools of philosophy they were there. When Adi Shankaracharya met Kumarila Bhatta, who was an old person at that point of time, who was a Mimamsaka. Mimamsakas are those who swear by the Vedas, but they restrict themselves to the ritualistic portion of the Vedas only. They don't go beyond it and emphasize the importance of the Jnana Kanda, which is Upanishads. Shankaracharya was not against the ritualistic portion, but at that point of time he said everybody gets stuck there. But beyond that you have to go further. Get into the knowledge. You cannot say that I am satisfied with just school. You have to graduate to college, then go to PhD, like that it is. And Kumarila Bhatta himself was a stalwart. In fact, he was a pioneer who was debating with Buddhists, and he made sure that Vedic Mata or the Vedic religion re-established itself, and he was instrumental in chasing away the practices of Buddhism, as it were. And Shankaracharya also did, but Kumarila Bhatta did a major work in that. He is considered the avatar of Lord Kartikeya. And then, and Adi Shankaracharya, when he is establishing the Vedanta, he goes to Kumarila Bhatta, where he is going through a self-punishment for himself. And he says, your sight itself is enough for me. I am fully convinced, and I am old now, and I am leaving my body. You have to go and convince Mandana Mishra, who is a very staunch Purvamimamsaka. He is a very staunch Karmata. That means who is involved in the rituals of the Vedas. And he is so strong in his conviction, that is what it is. He believed, he is not having any other thing except his faith, his belief, that all the Jnana Kanda and other things is waste. You have to do the Vedic rituals, what is given in Vedas, by which you gain Swarga. Again you come back, again you do these rituals, and he was firm believer of it, and to the point core, each in letter and spirit he followed it. Adi Shankaracharya goes there, and when a great karma is going on in his house, which is Shraddha Karma or something. In that Shraddha Karma, and finally when a sannyasi goes to any householder, he should not be rejected. And sannyasi goes to the householder only for bhiksha. So he is one person who really doesn't like sannyasis, Mandana Mishra. But the people who have come there, it is said Veda Vyasa and such type of people come in the form to attend his rituals, because he is so great in performing the rituals. So they say that you have no right to chase him away. When a sannyasi comes, you have to offer him bhiksha. That is the sort of this thing. So he comes out reluctantly and he says, and there is a beautiful conversation between them. We are not going into that, but finally he asks, what do you want? Bhiksha. What bhiksha? He says, bhiksha of debate. I seek for it. And then the debate is starting. The debate is, he has to prove his standpoint and his philosophy. Adi Shankaracharya is to establish his thing. And the condition is that if Mandana Mishra loses, he will take up sannyas and become disciple of Adi Shankaracharya. If Adi Shankaracharya loses, he will leave sannyas, get into Grahastha Ashrama, marry. That sort of this thing. And wife of Mandana Mishra is the judge. Such a great lady she was. Now, why I am talking about the debate is, towards the end of the debate, I don't know, it went on for 21 days, etc. They say, Mandana Mishra began to see the reason and logic in Adi Shankaracharya's arguments. And slowly his mind starts getting convinced about pursuing knowledge. So, rituals are necessary up to a point, and then finally you have to move further than the rituals. So, all that thing you do regarding that also is a thing that he got convinced. So, here the debate is not finally, no, I somehow stand to where I am convinced only. I am not coming into your territory, you don't come into my territory. Let us agree to disagree. Like some people say in most of the argument. There's no agreeing to disagreeing and all here. This can happen only if you are not holding on to something because of I am holding it. If the emphasis is on finding out the truth, even in worldly matters, let us assume, there are some people who still hold on to it and argue that whether there was a Babri Masjid or not, whether Babur built it or not, and no, there was never a temple there. There are some who say there are temples there, archaeological evidences are there, so many things are there. But even when you are in one side and you are entering into a debate positively, your idea must be to find out what is the real truth there, rather than just justifying what you are holding on to. Of course, you have your strong arguments you have to put forward, he has to put forward, he has to question and counter question. All this is part of the argument. But finally, you have to be fond of truth. You have to be established in truth. You must like to establish that truth. So therefore, that debate and argument aspect is very much necessary. Now, why did that come here? We went to...
To be peaceful in the beginning
and in the end, yes. In Bhagavad Gita also it is said, so ma vidvishavahe, there is, let it be peaceful, he says, because there is a chance of each and every person understanding or misunderstanding in his own way. So, the whole idea of gaining the knowledge by your debating, by your churning, by your reflection, by whatever way, it is to finally get into what is truth. That is most important. You may end up taking a class or not taking a class. You may end up writing a book or not writing a book. You may end up doing a PhD or not doing PhD. That is all depending on what your interest, inclination, Swadharma is. But in and through what you do, your actions, in and through your Swadharma, you must keep this, that I have to get established in truth. So that is a person who gets that awareness. He understands that at present I am not in my original state. This aspect that we are not aware of our original state and we are blissfully in that ignorant state is the highest form of delusion. In that delusion, we take up this individuality, and that individuality goes through 3 states of consciousness, which will take it up in the next class. Yes, sir.
In this context, what is the difference between avidya, jnana, brahma and bhranti? And how, in what context, what is it?
I really do not know the import of all words, but avidya and ajnana is the same. Both are ignorance. Vidya and jnana. Last class also you talked about viditva and jnatva. I said the root is the same. So in that case, both will refer to ignorance. Bhranti, See, when we talk about delusion, Bhranti and Brahma, I do not know, must be of same root. Brahma is fourth bha, right?
Brahma.
Fourth bha. Huh. Yeah, then it must be the same root. So, when it is talking about a mind state of confusion, in a state of chakkar, that is called as Bhranti. That is why in Sanskrit, the word for bee is Bhramara. Bhramara means bee. Bee, what it does is it is never steady. It keeps on circulating around the flower and it is never steady in one place. It's called Bhramara. So,
Brahman traveling.
Brahman is circulating. That is moving around Brahman. So, Bhramara is the state of a mind's chakkar or confusion. In other words, this delusion we talk about in two levels. Absolute level, that I am not the self, that I do not know I am the self, that I am ignorance of my ignorant. That ultimate delusion is I really cannot answer even any one question with reference to life. Who am I? Where have I come from? Where am I going? Nothing of it I know. And still I say I am fine. That is the absolute delusion. Now, with reference to the delusion of the mind at the relative level, you can say, let us say, when any emotion goes beyond your control, where you lose yourself, that is also called as moha. Krodhat bhavati sammohaha says in Bhagavad Gita, that moha is the delusion at the relative level. So that can be taken as some sort of a confusion of the mind. But exact Sanskrit word, I am not getting into it, but this is the spirit. Like Sita was deluded when Lakshmana refused to, go, when she ordered him to go and save Rama. That is, in extremity of anger, what she got into was a delusion. So the mind is not hers, meaning the original nature of Sita, in that sense.
Like in example of Sukti, Rajat or Rajju Sarpa, is it Brahma or is it Bhranti?
That's what I do not know what is Brahma or Bhranti. How can I answer that? But it is delusion. In ultimate, you take it to be a delusion. And you go and find out the root of these two words. It must be the same from what the words are. Yeah. We'll conclude with the bhajans here.
Ananda Govinda Radhe Gopala Jayananda Mukunda Ananda Govinda Radhe Gopala Govinda Madhava Gopala Keshava Govinda Madhava Gopala Keshava Giridhari Giridhari Jaya Radhe Gopala Giridhari Giridhari Jaya Radhe Gopala Ghanshyam Shyam Shyam Jaya Jaya Radhe Gopala Ghanshyam Shyam Shyam Jaya Jaya Radhe Gopala Jayananda Mukunda Ananda Govinda Radhe Gopala Jayananda Mukunda Ananda Govinda Radhe Gopala Govinda Madhava Gopala Keshava Govinda Madhava Gopala Keshava Gopala Keshava
पूर्णमिदम् पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः